Hello everyone and Merry Christmas, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about 10 best Path of Exile builds to start 2022 with. We are at the very end of Scourge League 3.16, it is the end of 2021 when I'm recording this, the year is coming to an end and so is the league. So there are a few builds that we have seen over the past couple of months that I have tried, that I've seen other people try. And this is my countdown, this is my Christmas special, where I'm counting down 10 best builds I think you can try at the end of 2021 and the start of 2022, at the very least until the next League 3.17 is released. For each build, I will quickly express my personal view on what is good about the build and what is bad about the build. In some cases, I will say a few words about why the build is not rated higher. If some build is low on my list, like number 10 or number 9, it doesn't mean that it is bad, it's a bad build. Obviously, it made my list, right? And if the build is not on the list at all, it means that I simply have not tried it and it didn't pop out at me somewhere here on YouTube, and as I was doing my research and as I genuinely was uploading my videos, there is just too much stuff out there in the Path of Exile kind of sphere of YouTube right now to go through and consider. So don't take any exclusions personally as a personal statement. Spot number 10 goes to the strength stacking Zombiemancer. It is a witch build obviously, and it is prioritizing the using the zombies as your minions. We're not diversifying too much into different types of minions in this particular case. So what is particularly good about this build and why did I put it into this list? Any minion builds, including this one, is very easy to start. It is very beginner friendly and it has massive endgame potential if it's built right, if it's optimized right, if you invest into cluster jewels, if you get all the expensive things that are maximizing your stats. And in this particular case, it's not all about the strength, but a lot of it is. Now, bad in my opinion, and why it is at the very bottom of the list, of this list particularly, is because this particular, even for a minion builds are not for everyone, because like minion builds are not for everyone, full stop. They can be a bit boring for people who like to be a little bit more actively involved with the enemies. You may not want minions to do all your dirty work for you, is what I'm saying. So minion builds do arguably get boring, but this one gets particularly boring because it is revolving very substantially around zombies. There are supporting golems, there is some other stuff going on, of course, but generally it's kind of a little bit one-dimensional. I think one-dimensional is a good word to describe this build. It is obviously still powerful enough, in my opinion, to deserve your attention, hence why it is on this list. Place number 9. Toxic Rain Raider. It is my build of my own that I adapted from something else, simplified it. It is very easy to get started with this build. There is no confusion whatsoever. You start with Caustic Arrow, then you get Toxic Rain and you stick with Toxic Rain. It is a reasonably powerful build. You can go pretty far with this build. It is not particularly gear dependent. Of course, if you try to push very high up into the end game, you need to invest into gear. There is no going around it. But overall, I think it is just straight down the lane, kind of easy, very accessible type of build that you can have a little bit of fun with, especially if you have not tried Toxic Rain before. I would be amazed if you haven't, but if you haven't, this is your chance. What's bad about it? It gets super boring rather quickly. Again, subjectively, it's super boring. It's just Toxic Rain everywhere and that's it. It heavily relies on avoidance kind of mechanics, on evasion and avoidance mechanics as you build this, as far as your defenses are concerned. And this generally always lets you down if you didn't cap literally every stat, every necessary stat that the build goes into and describes to you, and then an unlucky boss hit reaches you. So you will die, you will die. And these are the weak points of this build, but I think the boredom is generally why it is in number 9 for me. Number 8 goes to another build of mine that I started this league with, Bane Occultist Witch. The good thing about it is that it is an unusual build for me personally, and it may be unusual for you. You may not have tried a Chaos build Witch, that would be a Bane Occultist, obviously, in this particular case. It is quite easy to build. Once again, it gets to the point of enjoyment fairly quickly, and it is very powerful with strong spreading chaos damage that is hard to resist as a player. I think it has a lot of things that are going for this build, absolutely no questions. Bad, look, if you start comparing different builds, if you look at the whole list rather than make your decision right now what to play or what not to play, you will notice that with Bane Occultist you could consider that area of effect is relatively limited unless you managed to spread the, your chaos spells among the mobs quite smartly. So it doesn't chain as well as, let's say, Arc does. And yeah, this could be a little bit limiting at clearing the maps. It relies on direct damage dealing. It is better on bosses than some other builds in this list, such as Vaal Arc, but it is not as good as clearing at clearing the maps. And defenses, okay, it's not the worst build, but it's not the best one either. So it's sort of, kind of in the middle of the pack. Spot number 7, you will be surprised, but it is occupied by my Vaal Arc Elementalist. I know it is like among my most popular videos on my channel, and for some reason among the community I am this Arc Elementalist guy who always starts the leagues with Arc Elementalist and then has to defend why this build is still a good build because people try to tell me just how not sustainable it is at endgame maps. I know, but let's start by talking about the good thing. It is my favorite league starter and one of the most fun builds to play, in my opinion. It is arguably the best build for brand new Path of Exile players to get an initial taste for the game and to fall in love with it. It has a fantastic, amazing clear speed. It is very fun gameplay, especially if you're not just using a baseline Arc spell, but Vaal Arc, the one that has that periodic blast that kills everything, fries everything on the screen. There is nothing like it. I insist on the fact that there is nothing like it. That's what's good about it. Bad? Yes, it has lower survivability. It is a lowish survivability build. It is dependent on always moving and always casting to do any forms of damage, which is very, very hard when you're trying to dodge boss mechanics. That's what makes this build primarily weak on bosses, especially endgame bosses, the ones that are thick, the ones that you cannot overwhelm with your amazing amount of lightning damage straight away, the one that's going to be frying everything up to the end game. And that's where the disappointments start. So you need to understand that that is the reason why I'm rating it relatively low on my list, but I will continue absolutely loving it, and I think it's one of the best builds to start a league with. Unlock content, earn currency, before you switch to something that you decided then to push endgame with. That is the only purpose of this build, and why I still love it and recommend it to you. Point number 6 is occupied by another build that I tried in Delve event of Scourge League not long ago, but somehow I didn't record my own footage, so I'm reusing the footage from the author of this build, Fuzzy Duck Z. The good things about this build is that, as the Duck Z it describes it to us in his video, which I encourage you to watch, it is linked in the description below, it is very, very easy to put together in bare bones structure that he chose, and he in his video says that it's not his creation, he also borrowed it from somewhere else. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's super simple playstyle, yeah, so you just throw around poisonous concoction and you then use the Plague Bearer, if I'm not mistaken on the name of the spell there, to spread the poisonous love around. It has great potential, yes, to be developed into something a lot sturdier for the end game. Otherwise, just for quick delve and for map clearing, you just essentially build up the stacks of Plague Bearer and then you run through the enemies and they just die. So it's quite okay, it's quite good, it's interesting, that's why it's high on my list. Bad, look, maybe in the delve environment specifically, not in the campaign environment, or maybe due to the build itself, it got boring for me as well rather quickly, so that's definitely bad. I would, however, say that it is better than Toxic Rain, maybe simply because Poisonous Concoction is a new skill in the game, relatively new, and I'm simply not bored of it personally. But maybe it is a credit to the build itself. In this current, once again, configuration from Fuzzy Ducksy, this build is not endgame proof, so I don't think it's sturdy enough. I will tell you straight away, I have not built it far enough, but I have tested it to about level 45. In Delve while the event was running. I didn't have that much time. I do think that it deserves a place in this list, hence is why I'm mentioning it to you here. Spot number 5 is occupied by another build I have not built myself. And if the previous one I did try starting to build, yeah, and had some success with it, some fun with it, this one I literally just simply observed and kinda took note of. It's something that I probably will be trying in very early 2022. It is a strength stacking Shrapnel Ballista Hierophant, so it's a totemic build from the author Palsteron. Sorry, mate. The good thing is that it looks like a lot of fun, at least to a person who loves totemic builds. That's me. It's a variation of a totem build. It looks like it has an amazing potential to delete bosses, as it's popular to say in the community these days. It looks like an immense potential. You throw totems, they all do this massive blast from all these ballistas, and the bosses get deleted. I am curious and excited to try this build. I have not tried to build this yet, but all of this, in all honesty, is good. Bad, it looks like it could get expensive the closer you get to the end game and the further you go. Hard to gauge for me right now, but it does look like it might be one of those expensive ones. Spot number 4 is occupied by another build, not my own, but something once again that I'm eyeballing, for the lack of a better word, from the sidelines right now. It is a cast-on crit Guardian Tank from Captain Lance. Once again, the link to the video, to the original video, is in the description below, and I thank the author for inspiring me and to include this in this list and to try it myself in early 2022. I'll be trying this. It looks amazing just in terms of how obnoxiously passive it is, and that is exactly how the author is advertising it. It is not even Path of Walking simulator, as some of those builds are, which I did not explicitly include in this one. We have no auto-bomber builds in this list. But this build, I suppose, is as close as we would get to a normal auto-bomber. Except the difference is that auto-bomber tries to kill things passively before they kill the player. And in this one, clearly the author is just sitting there and letting the boss just hit him, and nothing happens. Attack seems to be still packing a punch, so it's a strong build. It's a strong enough build. Now to the bad points, and yeah, unfortunately it's pretty crushing news. It looks insanely expensive. Insanely expensive, even in a basic configuration, from what he has shown us, from what I've seen in this video. And maybe to you it's okay, which is why I'm including it here, which is why I'm telling you that I'm curious about this build. I haven't tried it personally, but even just looking at what he's talking about in the video, I encourage you to take a look yourself if you're interested. It does look insanely expensive, and that is a massive, massive negative, because my content is mostly for beginners of Path of Exile, for people who do not have a few exalts to throw around here and there, and he just pushes it into several of those exalts, if not into dozens of those. Alright, to point number 3, one of my favorite builds in this particular case, reborn in the Freezing Pulse Totem Hierophant incarnation of itself. It's a totemic build, Hierophant. It had to be in the top 3 for me if you have been following my content for a while, and if you haven't, please subscribe, like the video. The good is that I like totem gameplay. It is the safest gameplay in the game. Additionally, this particular version freezes enemies. It adds an extra defensive layer, making things much easier. Based on the core spell that you get very early on, Freezing Pulse, you can start leveling Freezing Pulse very early on as well. So it's very easy to get started. Your gratification, I suppose, your leveling, your build-up of the essential components of this build starts very early on compared to a lot of other builds that I'm talking about in this list. It doesn't rely on any expensive gear pieces either. It's a rather cheap build. It doesn't get much easier than this to level this up. So it's a fantastic build, really love it. Bad things, okay, well, totems are not for everyone. I already said it before, I'll say it again. Totemic gameplay to some people seems to be a little bit too much like stop and go, even though you don't have to. You can get into a nice fluid pattern of playing with totems, but it is what it is. It struggles, this particular build, with these gear pieces, with this stuff that I showed to you, my friends, in my video. It struggles in this configuration with maps above tier 6. So this is definitely not the high-end game, but it is enjoyable enough for casuals who try a few builds, have fun a little bit, then move on to another build. It's definitely a very solid build, but it's not, I don't know, it's not really top-end game proof. It needs more defensive layers or better gear. Now to point number 2, surprisingly occupied by General's Cry Shield Crush build something relatively recent on my channel. You can take a look at that. The good things are it's unusual and fun. It is not something that I tried ever before. I had a lot of fun building it. I had a lot of fun recommending it to you in that video, the build guide. It scratches many itches, basically. I like the look of Cyclone, and I like this sense of kinda minion play where the actual force is not coming from minions. Anyway, spoiler alert. It's rather tanky. It's hard to kill, well, relatively hard to kill. It's quite powerful once Shield Crush had a chance to level up. And it's not too expensive, I would say. So this is all definitely very good about this build. Bad is that it takes the longest to get to the point of enjoyment. What I mean by that is that you do not get General's Cry straight away. You do not get Cast when channeling support straight away. Shield Crush as the main damage dealing ability needs to level rather substantially before you start feeling it properly. We are talking about level 40 plus. Before you even start sensing, hey, I actually became quite powerful and I'm actually enjoying myself. These are negatives, they have to be called out. And it relies on a few non-negotiable kinda items, yeah, but at the same time, you know, I suppose it is not the most expensive one. We're certainly not talking about the prices of that massive kind of tank build that we were just discussing there from Captain Lance. And finally, we are at number 1, my friends, with this Christmas special list of my favorite builds of Path of Exile for the end of 2021, start of 2022. It is Physical Trapper, Seismic and Exsanguinate Trap Saboteur. The good things about this build are that traps are fun, at least subjectively fun. It's a relatively new mechanic for me personally as a player of Path of Exile, and I really enjoyed playing with traps. Seismic Trap specifically as a spell is quite overpowered damage-wise. Exsanguinate as a very weird life-costing trap is also quite overpowered map-clearing device as soon as you add chain support to it and a few other things. So once it starts chaining, it turns into quite a lot of fun clearing the whole maps with only a couple of blasts. It's awesome. It is also the highest focused boss damage that I personally have achieved with any of my casual friendly easy builds. So these are all massive pluses, and even though it seems like there will be more bad things to say about it in a second, I still recommend this build and it's still number 1 in my list. It is just what it is. What's bad about it? Let's just wrap up with the bad stuff. It is not the most trivial build to level up or to get to the desired state of enjoyment. It needs a few pivots in leveling, such as often this build is recommended by a lot of other people. I even considered doing it myself. It is recommended to being leveled with elemental damage in mind first, with elemental traps, and then at a certain point in time you invest quite a few of Orbs of Regret and you retrace your steps and you invest into boosting physical damage, and then you switch properly to physical traps such as Exsanguinate Trap. I tried to bypass this limitation in my particular build, sacrificing early game damage and kind of benefiting from the fact that I didn't have to retrace a lot, as much as other builds would tell you, similar builds would tell you. So maybe if you haven't seen that video, I recommend that you take a look at that. It is not also most defensively capable build. It's not intended to be the most tanky one, but it's okay. It's not too bad. And also the damage output is so absolutely obscenely massive that you kind of avoid all that, avoid the need to tank, so to speak, because your seismic traps primarily will kill the enemies before you know it. It also relies on a few relatively expensive in the eyes of a complete beginner items, such as Cold Iron Point Daggers. They are relatively expensive, certainly very hard to come by in the solo self-found, if at all possible, so you would be relying on buying stuff from Community Market. I have a guide on how to buy stuff on the Community Market, by the way, in case you have no idea what that means. Take a look on my channel for another video that talks about that specifically. So it's not really a barrier, but for some people it might be seen as a barrier. So this is a bad kind of thing. Imagine me doing the quotes here with my fingers for this build. And finally, so to wrap this up, right, all of that adds up to one final bad point, I suppose, that makes this build not a league starter. It is kind of mid-league or finisher of the league once you have been able to accumulate some currency, be a bit more confident with buying stuff from the community market. Once you're happy to do that, and that's hardly a beginning of the Path of Exile journey for a lot of people who are casual players, right? Once you're comfortable with that, it's going to be a fantastic build, probably one of the best ones I played, which is why it's number 1 in my list. But maybe it is not something that you would start your journey with. So that's definitely, you've been warned in that regard. And that's it, my friends, for today. I hope you enjoyed this Christmas special from me and this list of best builds for Path of Exile, starting from Scourge League 3.16 and going forward into the early 2022, at least until they do something with any of these spells mentioned in this video in the next League of 3.17, because some nerfs might be coming, we don't know, at the moment it's very hard to predict. Some of these builds might become obsolete. Please subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter for any of the updates that might be related to some builds that did become obsolete. Maybe I will remake one of them and stuff like that. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like if you haven't liked it already. It is nice because YouTube then knows to show it to more people, and the more of us here, the merrier, obviously. Happy Christmas and have a safe new year. Have a lot of holidays, wear a mask, be safe, and I'll be speaking with you again here on this channel in 2022. Thanks very much for tuning in. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.